It's no secret that the NBA is a multi-billion-dollar company, and just like any other business, they will do whatever they can to maximize their success as much as possible, even if that means pulling a few strings to get their way. As many fans already suspect, they do have a financial interest in certain teams and players doing well. We're all aware of this, but for some reason, we tend to purposely ignore all the red flags we've seen over the years, and really trick ourselves into believing that the NBA has to have more integrity than that. There's no way they fix games, right? Well, sorry to break it to you, but the multiple series I'm about to go through in this video will have you finally accepting the harsh truth about what really goes on behind the scenes. Well, I'm gonna at least try to convince you anyway. Now don't get me wrong, I still very much love this game, but unfortunately, these instances will always be remembered as very suspicious. 1989 was the very first year the Orlando Magic came into existence, and it was not surprising that they had a difficult time making a name for themselves at first, until a few years later, they landed a player that would make an immediate impact on their franchise, Shaquille O'Neal. They took him number 1 overall in the 1992 NBA draft, as he would go on to have one of the best rookie seasons the NBA has ever seen. He obviously won the Rookie of the Year, but couldn't quite lead his team into the playoffs, just barely missing out. But everybody knew that Shaq was a superstar in the making, including David Stern. This is where things get fishy. In just the very next year, Orlando once again received the number 1 pick in the 1993 NBA draft, despite only having a 1.5% chance of winning it. I mean, just think about it. The league clearly saw that Shaq was big time, so it's quite possible that they went out of their way to make sure that the Magic would be featured on national TV on a consistent basis going forward. And what better way to make them an even more intriguing team than to put them in the best position in the following draft as well. As you all know, they ended up drafting Chris Webber number 1, but then soon realized that they really needed help in the backcourt, so they traded Webber to the Golden State Warriors in exchange for Penny Hardaway, as well as 3 future first-round picks. Many strongly believe that the NBA gave them the little extra boost that they needed, and it most certainly worked, as they went on to make the finals just 2 years later. They quickly matured into one of the most dominant teams in the league, and David Stern might have had something to do with it. When you think of the Lakers' most infamous playoff series, you usually think of the 2002 Western Conference Finals against the Kings, and rightfully so, but let's dive into one that doesn't really get enough of the spotlight, the 2000 Western Conference Finals featuring the Lakers and Blazers. Most remembered that Game 7 as an epic collapse by Portland, but some say it was most definitely fixed. These two teams faced one another on multiple occasions in the postseason, and every time the Lakers were the ones who came out on top. But in the year 2000, the Trailblazers looked like a legitimate threat to finally take them out. The Blazers were a very big team, with a starting 5 of Arvydas Sabonis, Rasheed Wallace, Scottie Pippen, Steve Smith, and Damon Stoudemire, along with Brian Grant, Jermaine O'Neal, Bonzi Wells, Detlef Schrempf, Greg Anthony, and Stacey Augmon coming off the bench. It appeared that Portland had what it took to win the series, but LA would quickly jump out to a 3-1 lead, making many assume that it was pretty much over. But Portland did not go down without a fight. They charged back into the series and managed to actually force a Game 7, and this is the game that created a ton of drama. Fast forwarding to the beginning of the fourth quarter, Portland had a comfortable 15-point lead over the Lakers, putting a massive amount of pressure on LA, which they then rose to the occasion and got back into the game. But of course, a few things had to go their way to pull it off. During that fourth quarter, the majority of the calls overwhelmingly went in favor of the Lakers, which led to the Blazers' top 2 defenders, Pippen and Sabonis, to foul out of the game, causing Portland to have no other choice but to settle with 6'8" Brian Grant, who was too small at center to handle Shaq. When it was all said and done, the free throw attempts made a huge difference on the scoreboard. Portland shot 16 while LA shot 37, and many believe that was no accident. Sure, Portland could have done a little bit better job at knocking down their shots, but it was clear that the NBA wanted to make more money, and they knew that a Portland-Indiana series was not what they wanted. So now we're stuck asking, could the Blazers have beaten the Pacers in the finals? We will never know. Next, we have a very controversial series that seems like it rarely gets brought up. In 2001, the Milwaukee Bucks took on the Philadelphia 76ers in the Eastern Conference Finals and started off as a very entertaining series. The Bucks would win 2 of the first 3 games, taking a 2-1 lead. So you know, heading into Game 4, the Sixers could not afford to lose, or else they would find themselves in a 3-1 deficit. And coincidentally, that's where the Bucks started complaining, as they felt everything was going against them. In that Game 4, Allen Iverson played absolutely atrocious. He couldn't seem to knock down any of his field goals, but he did end up taking more free throws than the entire Milwaukee Bucks team put together. And once the game was already decided, then the officials awarded the Bucks a late trip to the line. But everybody, including the fans in the building, knew that they just wanted to make it look like there was no free throw advantage for Philadelphia. Those Sam Cassell free throws, with only 2 seconds left on the clock, did not even make a difference in the final outcome. Game 5 was more of the same. There were a ton of questionable calls, including multiple technical fouls and so-called flagrant fouls that just gave the Sixers free points. And let me point out that Glenn Robinson, who was one of Milwaukee's top 2 scorers, did not even attempt a single free throw until Game 5, which just shows you what was going on, as the Bucks lost another heartbreaker. Now Game 6 was a different story, as Ray Allen exploded for 41 points and managed to tie up the series 3 games apiece to force a Game 7, but the league, possibly because they feared that Milwaukee might pull it off, went back and reviewed one specific moment in that Game 6 that would ultimately be too much to overcome. They got real desperate and actually changed a flagrant foul that was called on the Bucks' best big man Scott Williams in the first half, and decided to upgrade it to where Williams would get suspended for Game 7 instead. And the NBA blindsided the Bucks by only letting them know just hours before tip-off. And after that, Milwaukee basically never had a chance in Game 7. After the series was over, George Karl, along with Ray Allen, strongly believed that the NBA, as well as NBC, did not want a small market team like the Bucks to advance to the finals. They really wanted the MVP, Allen Iverson, to face Kobe and Shaq. In fact, Ray Allen said that his family told him that they actually saw David Stern standing up and looking like he was cheering for Philadelphia, while sitting near him in the crowd, and they found that very suspicious. Man, as far as I'm concerned, case closed. About 8 years earlier, George Karl strongly believed that he was once again on the wrong side of shady officiating. Before those Milwaukee Bucks, Karl was the head coach of the Seattle Supersonics, and in 1993, his team went up against the Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference Finals, who had the best record in all of basketball that season, as well as the MVP of the league, Charles Barkley. Throughout the first 6 games of the series, nothing really unusual took place. It was as normal of a series as they come, but of course, Game 7, like always, received a lot of criticism. As you all know, the Suns survived Game 7 to advance to the NBA Finals. They won that closeout game pretty convincingly, by 13 points to be exact. But we do have to point out the fact that that margin of victory was made possible by the Suns shooting 64 free throw attempts for the game, which was a playoff record at the time. That's even more free throw attempts than what we saw in Game 5 of that infamous 2006 Finals, and in Game 6 of that infamous 2002 Western Conference Finals, as Seattle had 3 of their players foul out. Now, Barkley did put up 44 points, but nearly half of those points did come at the free throw line. To many people, it was abundantly clear that the league had an agenda, and that was to have a Barkley versus Jordan matchup in the finals. Don't believe me? Then how do you explain this? It was reported that NBC had already prepared for that Suns and Bulls matchup by actually going out of their way to film a commercial about them facing one another weeks before we even knew what the finals would be. You cannot make this up. This controversial Game 7 has kinda been forgotten about over time, and I'm sure the NBA wants to keep it that way. Alright guys, feel free to let me know some other potentially fixed series that nobody really seems to mention. Make sure to comment down below, and of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.